basically what I'm going to be talking about is a lot of sort of what you were saying, Gabe, but like basically that the subversion of normalcy is the goal of the film, and a lot of films like it, through like the use of grief and comedy. And on the Ghouls, we've talked a lot about grief. And we have so many episodes about grief. I can't think of them right now, to be very honest.
That's like horror's favorite thing.
Yeah, it's so much is explored through grief and loss, and horror just is always doing that, and trauma. Most of our episodes tie in trauma in some way, so we've said many things about it. However, I think Lisa Frankenstein opens up a door to a way of healing that we haven't talked about too in depth as a horror themed podcast, and that is the way specifically comedy can be used as a tool for healing. I feel like we've said it at least partially before, but there is something like cathartic about horror as well as comedy. That's why they kind of like tie well into each other. So one thing that is definitely true about trauma and grief is that the exchange from those experienced is the exchange like of experience that you have, that after you've experienced this loss and trauma, is that you're more likely to have a more honest perspective on the world and how quickly someone can be lost to it. And it has a way of creating humans who like dark humor. I looked it up. I was like doing the research, and it says it's very common that if you've experienced trauma or loss, that you're going to like vibe more with dark humor because it subverts what's expected from society. Essentially, there's also something to be said about the correlation between absurd humor to trauma as well. So Gabe, you do like absurd humor, so maybe that's the trade-off. You know, maybe you got off the train right before dark humor, but like you got the absurd humor trait. But it's essentially when something doesn't make sense, something as deep and profound as loss of someone you love, and when those around you just want you to get back to normal, there's a lot of comfort in the subversion of normalcy, because it like lets you sit with that for a little longer when everyone else is like, get over it, be normal, contribute to society. And then you're like, I am pain. What do you mean? So like any disruption of that can act as like a subversion of that normalcy and can be very comforting. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I remember distinctly when I was grieving my grandpa, the person who essentially raised me, I handled it rough. I was a whole entire mess. And as a human who largely never let anyone witness them experience emotions, in my youth specifically, adult me has stayed emotional. Me being a mess was like a really jarring and uncomfortable thing for other people to witness. People would get really uncomfortable around my grief. That was the instance where the person was like, it's not cute. Can you please stop? Like, you're at work. And I was like, I'm 20. What do you want from me? But people would get really uncomfortable around my grief. And I feel like that's something that like Lisa is experiencing in the film. And I could sense them wanting me to stop talking about it, or wanting me to just go back to answering good when they asked how I was doing, you know what I mean? And that demand to return to normalcy after something so abnormal has happened to you can be really uncomfortable. And I really appreciate that being shown how it was in the film. I felt it was very accurate. Like in terms of horrific ways to lose someone, axe murder is pretty high on the list.
In front of you.
And like expecting her to just be like, it's fine, I could just go back to high school and like make friends and like be regular. Like, what do you mean? That was super like, absurd.
The stepmom to be like, you're acting out by doing this thing again, and not being like, why would she ever even do that? Like, I don't think her brain could ever concoct that. Like, that has messed her up.
It's very much like, I had to deal with this in this way, so everyone else has to, kind of thing. Like, I struggled, so everyone else should. It was very... I believed her that she would think that way, considering the time period. But it was super silly. It was like, what do you mean? It was very absurd. So this demand to return to normalcy, essentially, is a really unfair expectation of society. And when your personhood is defined by what you can produce under capitalism and contribute, your ability to fall in line, especially like in high school when they're like, hammer the nail down, just be normal, get a job, keep moving, grief can really act as a form of protest against that system, or at least be perceived that way. by people viewing it. They want you to not do it. They want you to get over and keep going. So absurd things like dark humor can appear as a really refreshing break from the normalcy we're forced to operate under. So Zelda Williams, who is Robin Williams' daughter, also describes this in a Rolling Stones article titled How Zelda Williams Found Humor and Trauma with Lisa Frankenstein, saying, I think my sense of humor was shaped by a lot of trauma. I find a lot of humor in darkness, and I want to make things lighter for other people. Aspects of that definitely carry over into this movie. We spend so much time trying to make the way we navigate anything more palatable to others, especially women. Lisa gets to do the opposite of this. And I think even like recognizing like my own stuff, like maybe part of why I didn't like it is because I wasn't expecting the unpalatableness to exist so boldly, because she was doing a lot, you know. She was murdering people, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to lose empathy. Like I first very empathy, and then you murdered a lot of people and hurt a lot of people, and now I'm like, oh, I get why, but also maybe let's not do that. But then I was also like, I'm not saying like I should accept the fact she murdered a bunch of people, but you know, she was being very unpalatable. She was grieving loud and in an unexpected way, and that like there's no good way to grieve. Sometimes it is just messy. Yeah. And like that
She's lashing out.
Yeah. So essentially making grief palatable is something lots of outsiders expect from a grieving person. And it's an unfair expectation. So it was cool to see an unpalatable expression of grief in such like a comedic and like over the top absurd way. Yeah. So it's also to say like suppressing grief only hurts, like, you know, when you do what everyone's saying, like, hey, stop feeling, that only hurts the person more, because repression of emotions can damage both the mind and body. There's literal science behind that. I can't remember what episode we talked about it, but I go in depth on that multiple times. So it's like pushing it down won't make it go away. It just makes it pop up in ways that can't be ignored. So like illness or damaging coping mechanisms like drugs or alcohol or murder, you know, unlikely to be murder, but here we are. As an added bonus, comedy and dark humor can actually help the healing process by providing a psychological and emotional release, kind of like what you were saying, Gabe. Like when individuals engage with comedic content or dark humor, it can trigger the release of endorphins, which are neurotransmitters that act as a natural painkiller and mood elevator. And this release can lead to a temporary reduction in stress and anxiety, offering individuals a respite from the emotional weight of trauma. And if you think of like who this film's coming from, like Robin Williams' child, that's really what his vibe was. He was like very much, I want to heal people, be funny so that we don't have to feel sad. And like I think it does, I mean,
that's like what he was doing.
And because he was so sad, so it's like the influence of that, you can definitely feel that in the film, and I think it really adds to it. So humor can also, Gabe, you mentioned this, add like a cognitive shift on how people will perceive their traumatic experiences. Like it really just like reshapes how we cope with things, and it offers like a respite for this trauma. And by finding humor in challenging situations, individuals may be able to reframe their narratives, viewing their experiences from a different angle. And this framing can contribute to a sense of empowerment and control, potentially reducing the emotional impact of the trauma. Everyone copes with trauma differently, so it's kind of like each person will experience it how they do. But it is common for comedy to be a form of like release for these really hard emotions. And additionally, as we see films do often, comedy and dark humor can create a sense of connection and community. So sharing a laugh with others can foster social bonds and provide a shared experience of relief and joy. It's kind of like the way horror is cathartic, is that you have like that community that you build from those experiences. And this communal aspect of humor can be particularly beneficial in the healing process, as it offers people a sense of support and understanding. So like you see something funny happen, you may be able to be more open with those around you. And it's important to recognize that the effectiveness of comedy and dark humor in healing trauma can also vary among people. While some may find these forms of humor helpful, others may not resonate with them, which is kind of maybe why we don't always love the dark humor. But I get why people like it. It's just maybe not for me. And therefore, it's essential to approach the use of humor specifically with sensitivity and respect for individual preferences and boundaries. So it's like not comedy, and like the quality of it really depends. It's a subjective thing because some people are going to think certain things are funny versus not. And just trying to be respectful of like what actually might hurt versus help, even though the intentions are good. But I don't think this film ends up harming anybody. I think it was just like really out there and absurd, which is cool. When used thoughtfully and in a supportive environment, comedy and dark humor can serve as a valuable tool for navigating the complexities of trauma and continuing the healing process. So if that was Zelda's goal, I think she does achieve it, which is cool. They also speak in the Rolling Stone article about how like writing was a big part of their grieving process. So like specifically like after their dad died, they wrote obsessively. They wrote all the time. And that was like a big part of them processing their grief. And that's actually like scientific. And as someone who also does this, Zelda's why for writing after the loss of her father resonated with me, because writing has always been a point of healing for me. And in the creation of like a webtoon and songwriting, they both act as like a processing of trauma. And I've experienced this in creating, like taking something really awful and transforming it into something beautiful or creative can be really cathartic, because you're like, oh, I've taken this awful thing and this pain I've experienced and made it into something beautiful that other people can enjoy. And that can really make it, not that like it's worth it, but like kind of makes it feel like, oh, this helped me create something I wouldn't have been able to create otherwise. And that means something. And it's also like a way of like prolonging legacy and memory of those experiences. And yeah, it just makes something more beautiful than its root cause. And this is apparently scientific, as writing and creative activities can play a crucial role in the healing process of trauma and grief. Expressive writing specifically has been shown to have therapeutic benefits. When individuals write about their traumatic experiences, it can help them process and make sense of their emotions. This process of emotional expression through writing can lead to a reduction in stress, anxiety, and depressive symptoms, and it can contribute to an increased sense of well-being and improved mood. So kind of like the endorphins thing. Engaging in creative activities such as art, music, crafting, it can provide individuals with a nonverbal outlet for expressing their emotions. And this form of expression can be particularly beneficial for individuals who find it challenging to articulate their feelings through words, like out loud. And creative activities allow individuals to externalize their emotions, providing a tangible representation of their internal experiences. This process can lead to a sense of catharsis and emotional release, potentially reducing the emotional burden associated with the trauma. From a neurodivergent perspective, it can also act as like a great stim or a physical outlet for the feelings. And it's also like there's literally in neurodivergence, there's like a thing, I forget what it's called right now, but it's where you don't always realize what you're feeling when it's happening in your body, and it's really hard to like identify what emotions that you're feeling and process them. Writing can act as like a way to process those emotions. For people who process through talking about them, or like don't feel till they've gotten it out through words, writing can stimulate that, and it's also kind of meditative. When writing about things that were traumatic or felt out of your control, being the narrator of that story of what happened can return some of that control too. If writing creatively, it can provide a path to like different endings too. So like growth in characters that didn't get to experience that in reality, and other forms of like catharsis. So like if they didn't get a happy ending in their life, you could write one. Or if something happened and you just was the worst, you wish it happened a different way, you could write that. You're in control of what you're writing, and that kind of like makes you the narrator of your own story. And when you've experienced something like really uncontrollable and traumatic, that can be really healing. Because of this, writing and creative activities can facilitate a sense of empowerment and control, and this empowerment can be instrumental in the healing process, fostering resilience and a positive sense of self. Moreover, writing and creative activities can promote mindfulness and self-reflection. Essentially, it's like very meditative to write. Like my mom talks about that, where she like writes all the time, like so much. And I think it's literally like a meditation for her. So engaging in these activities encourages individuals to be present in the moment and connect with their inner experiences. It's like a very like self-reflective, self-aware experience where you actually can experience emotional regulation in real time. It allows people to develop a deeper understanding of their emotions and thought patterns too, because then you have like a record. You're like, oh, I can go back and see, like, for the last 3 weeks I've been sad. I maybe should go talk to somebody. Versus like if you're just living day to day, you might have like kind of like an unawareness to the fact that you're sad, because it kind of all blurs together. And it also can provide people with like a break from intrusive thoughts and rumination associated with trauma, because you're like kind of focusing on the moment instead of just like going in a brain spiral. And overall, writing and creative activities offer specific and tangible benefits in the healing of trauma. They provide individuals with diverse avenues for emotional expression, empowerment, and self-discovery. And it basically contributes to their overall well-being and resilience in the face of these events. So like, the fact that Zelda is a writer makes sense. The fact that a lot of creative people have experienced some variety of trauma or loss or hardship is telling. Like, it's very real. It's a big way to process what you're going through and heal from it. So that part's dope.
Yeah. And we've definitely, talked about how horror can kind of tickle the same things that comedy does, because it has that same like rising action and release that just lets you kind of work through it. And horror, like when it has a happy ending, sometimes a little less like a happily ever after ending, but still like a happy enough ending, that can feel really like a release too. Like we got through it, we endured it, but we got through that. It acknowledges that we change when things happen to us, but we persevere. We always joke that like there's a ghouls for that. When it comes to grief, there are ghouls for that.
We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and we have episodes on Heather's and Jennifer's Body if you want to check those out to learn more about those films. We have, like we said, plenty on grief. I think Our Haunting of Hill House has some really amazing parts about grief, because that's all the stages of grief. We have I'm Totally Fine, I think was fine, about her friend who died, and it was like the alien takes on her shape. That was such a great exploration of grief. Even Megan had some really interesting points to make about children in grief. Like, listen, we've talked about it. Talk to Me, talking about grief in teens, and that really quintessential part of growing up and losing someone and not having the support systems, unconditional love that you need during that time. And so, it could take a lot of different forms, and I think giving people the space and the time that they need to work through that is what's really important. It's over a year since I lost my grandmother, and that's still like they're just the other day I was just looking out the window and I was like, I really miss my grandmother. Like, just feeling that, and that's like not gonna just go away one day, and I know that it's affecting you and other members of my family even more, and who interacted with her more. I was like, if I'm feeling this, like I would absolutely want to make sure that they feel comfortable to do that. And I've experienced all kinds of loss, and I know how like absolutely derailing and detrimental it can be to your health and like your understanding of the world and your place in it. So yeah, I do think like being able to laugh and hold space for that and like be with them in a unique way is also really important. And so I think Lisa Frankenstein, like, for all its silly antics, it is a really funny film. I think what got me and what made it hard to like just truly resonate with it is the existence of Taff. I think she really messed me up. And similar to like how I can't fully care for Needy because I care so much about Jennifer and what her story is. Like Taff just feeling that emotional loss from her mom, being such a genuinely good person. Like, she did try. She did honestly care about Lisa and was totally wrecked and did not need to be. But that's just like that. I mean, that happens. Like, hurt people, right? And when she was like forced to, like, Lisa was forced to kind of shut all of that out, and she finally just like exploded and let all that out and was hurting all of these relationships, there's gonna be like, you know, debris. There's gonna be like an aftermath, and like innocent parties are gonna be hurt sometimes. And it just, for me, I wanted, and I know Lisa tries in the end, and she, you know, apologizes. She said, I get it, you really did care about me. I just feel like there could have been a little more acknowledgement of the pain she caused for her, and taking responsibility. And she's a teen, so she's not usually do
well, because
that.
It's like her trauma that she experienced, she basically put on to somebody else, like gave them a very similar story, like a horrific and graphic death for their mom while they weren't in the room, but like still it's very cyclical, and you're like, oh, I really wish that it didn't happen exactly like that. Like the mom sucked, yes, but like,
but we don't know anything about Lisa's mom.
She
could have sucked too.
She could have. It's just it's just, I agree. I think the Taft thing, like, it just made it hard for me to root for Lisa as hard as I think I would have otherwise, specifically because like it was like the reciprocal harm that she was causing, and I was like, oh,
because Taft was hurting, she was trying, she was so panicked. Like, I've been like, she triggered some responses for me, like her calling everywhere trying to figure it out. I was like, girl. And it's like I do like, and it's no like shade to the film for doing that. I think it's brilliant that it included that, right? Because I think it's so easy, like they so easily could have just labeled her as generic cheerleading rude girl, right? They could have labeled her that. We could have, like, she could have not really cared about her mom. We could have just had her mom be like the evil stepmom that we lose, like she's just collateral damage, like we're glad she's gone kind of thing. By not doing that, by instead like making her seem like a person and making it really real, I think grounded it. And I think that's something that just Diablo Cody does, right? Is like these characters are all, they're not one dimensional. Like even the ones we just get a few moments with, you get little like insight into who they are and what their motivations are and what they're doing here. I think they're like the boy who he's a like he's a teen boy, so shouldn't be murdered. But having repercussions for his actions, absolutely. The first boy.
I agree.
Totally repercussions for his actions, for sure. And I'd say he's the one we didn't get a background for. Like he was just skeevy, you know? But I think it, like, by making Taft that and making it so that we couldn't fully root for Lisa was super intentional. And does show like that sometimes we do have collateral damage. We hurt people. We leave people in the wake of trying to heal. Because you become a hedgehog, right? You want to be close to people, but you're hurting them.
Even like after Lisa is like presumed dead, she like still goes to the grave. I'm just like,
with her stepdad that she's like, she totally loves that guy. She's like, take it in, you're my dad now. She's just so sweet. Even knowing all of that, absolutely. So I think like that alone, like Taft changed the whole film for me. And I think in really the best of ways. So like one, it just like it made the dark comedy feel so much darker and heavier. And I think I will say, as far as like dark comedy goes, it is way more accessible to me and like understandable than Heather's was. I think Heather's was just agree. I was like, I don't give any care about these kids. Like, they're just so pompous and just like fighting with them. And that was the point. And I get that's the point. So anyone who's yelling at me on the internet, I get that's the point. I can still not like it.
That's allowed.
I'm still not allowed. But it was really funny. I think I'm going to come back around and say I actually did really enjoy Lisa Frankenstein. And it would be a dark comedy I do like. It's just like a dry humor sometimes. I just don't...
I think we just have to watch it again, like knowing what it's gonna be, and I think we'll like it a lot more. I think.
Anyway, that was our second episode of our Monstrous Love series. We have some more coming for you. Let us know what you think about Lisa Frankenstein, how you feel about Diablo Cody's other film, Jennifer's Body. Do you love Heather's? Are there dark comedies where you're like, no, you have to give this a shot, Gabe?
Yeah.
You just
change your
doing
mind.
It wrong. Totally, like, change my mind. Convince me of the ulterior is what you said once in an episode.
Yeah.
Ghouls. Convince me of the ulterior. So do that. And then remember to like and subscribe. We love hearing from you guys.
We do.
And
comments make our day.
Yeah, don't get married.
Or bring me a lot of anxiety. All right. Don't get married, delete your kids. Yep.
Delete your kids. Or you get murdered by an accident.
Hopefully not. An accident.
Serial killer.
Yeah.
And then your kid, like, my kid would. My kid would spend a lot of time in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And like I'd be like
as a former cemetery kid, yeah. Probably same.
So go hang out in the cemetery with your kids. Some rubbing,
scrippy
communion with the dead there, because they were somebody.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.